In today's video, we're going to show the top 3 ways to get weather data into Excel. And we're going to use some simple techniques that don't require any code at all the way to more sophisticated techniques if you're a coder and you want to do some scripting directly within Excel. The first method we're going to use is to download the weather data directly from the website to your local computer, and then we can just open it up in Excel. So here I have the weather data query builder here, and I can access here, and I'm going to import a set of locations from a file I have created earlier. So I'm going to go here, open the data. This locations is just a set of city names and countries, so I'm going to just choose location as the address and the system will automatically recognize it. You can see here I've got London, Tokyo, Washington DC. Go ahead and import that into the system, and when I view the data here, you can see that I have the next 15-day weather forecast for each of my locations, and I can switch between the locations. And this file of locations can be 10, 20, 100, even 1,000, all depending on your plan level. So now I can download this data directly to Excel. So I can hit the download button, and I have a number of format options, and you'll notice that there's a CSV format, which is called comma separated values. There's also Excel. So let's start with Excel. Hit run. The data set is ready, so I'm going to hit the download button, and you can see down in the bottom left there, we now have a file, a zip file, named the same as my data set, and it just took the first name in the list there. Now, what you'll notice is that this is a zip file. I can open it. So, for example, if I just say open here in Windows Explorer, you can see that I've got an Excel file for each of my locations. If I double click to open each of those, Excel is going to open and it shows my data. It gives me a little warning, the standard warning for downloading information from the internet. And I trust this location, and there it is. There's the data for each of the locations, London for the next 15 days forecast. Excel is a good format, but in some cases you're going to want all those locations put together as one file. So let's now look at a different technique using the CSV format. So I'm back in the query builder, and now I'm going to choose I'm going to choose download again, but I'm going to choose a different format. So rather than Excel, I'm going to choose CSV. CSV is comma separated values, which is a simpler data format, but it's understood by many different systems, whether it's Excel, Google Sheets, and BI tools such as Power BI or Tableau. So this is a great format for downloading weather data. So I'm going to go ahead and hit continue again, just like we did before. When I hit run query here, it's going to save my query, and now it's submitted back to the back end. And now it's ready to download. And we can see that as it downloads as a CSV file, so london.csv, but it's immediately available to Excel because it's in a format. It's not a zip file of different locations, it's one format. So if I open it up here in Excel, you can see that all my locations are joined together, appended together in the data set. So I have first Germany, then Washington DC, then Tokyo and London. And this is actually an option whether I choose like this for CSV at least. CSV is the only format that allows you to append all the data and for all the locations into one data set, which is often the best way to get data into Excel because it allows for easy processing afterwards. So that sort of explains this format, just downloading it. It's the easiest way to do it. You don't have to think about how to integrate it into Excel, and there's no permissions related issues with this approach. But it's not as good if you want to have the data refresh. So for example, if I wanted this set of weather forecast but refreshed every day whenever I open Excel, there are some other ways to do it that are actually going to be better for you. Now we're going to set up a query to bring this data that we've just created into Excel directly. And then we're going to set up a schedule so that the Visual Crossing server refreshes the data set every single day. And then in Excel, the data set's going to be automatically refreshed. So let's head over to the My Datasets, and you'll see that we have the data set that we created, the London, UK, which is the 5 cities. So there's a couple of links on the right hand side. There's a button to download the data, which is the same as we did before, but there's also a copy link, and copy link is a URL that we can use to actually bring the data directly into Excel. If I create a blank new workbook here in Excel, rather than copying and paste the data or loading up the data, I'm going to navigate to the data tab and create a new data query. So I'm going to click on from web, because what we've just copied it is a simple web link. I'm going to paste that into here and then press OK. And we can see that we have a preview of the data. One thing to change in this is that we should change this from whichever encoded it detected to UTF-8. That's particularly important if you have an extended character set that might not be represented correctly in the first set of file format. So UTF-8 is the file origin to choose here. And then we can just go ahead and load the data. And you can see now we have that same data that we saw, but we've also on the right-hand side got a query. And I can ask Excel to refresh that at any time. And I can set it up in Excel to refresh, say, when I open up the workbook after I've saved it, but maybe every day I can load it. So here we have the data, and now this is always connected to that data set. The next step is to go back to the data set within Visual Crossing and set it up as a scheduled data set. So I'm going to click on it just to load it, hit the download button, but in this case, rather than going through and hitting download, you can see we can download it by hitting the run query. I'm going to hit on the setup schedule link, and then so it recommends running it at 7 AM every day, and I save that schedule. And now this is saved. If I hit back in to go back to my data sets, this data set now has a clock by it indicating that it's going to be run every day at a certain time, in this case 7 AM, so the data is ready for me to load into Excel and maybe analyze my locations for what the weather forecast will be for each location for the next 15 days. So this is probably the most recommended approach to doing to importing data into Excel, because it gives you both the flexibility to download the data every day without having to load up the data manually. You just hit that one button in Excel, but there's no code required to do this. I don't have to write any code or any special import logic on the Excel side to do this. So this gives me a lot of power, but is very simple to do. So this is probably the best way to Excel to import data into Excel in most cases. You get the refreshable query, but you don't have any code you have to write. Now let's go up to the next level, where we actually start to write some scripting or coding logic to actually load up data. And I can explain why that's a good thing in certain cases. We're now going to combine the Visual Crossing Weather API with Microsoft's Power Query scripting language, which is a way that you can bring in and manipulate data within Excel and some other tools such as Power BI. And one of the big advantages of this is even though it's starting to require some coding, this actually allows you to do some more advanced techniques. In particular, what we're going to show here is adding parameters to your Excel workbook that you change, and then that can cause the query to change and reflect those changes, so the location, the start date, or the end date. So if we look on the screen, we've got Query Builder here with a query for London from the 1st of January till the 31st of January. And if I click over to the API, then I can see that I have a API request here that's formatted, that's bringing in that same data. So London from the 1st of January 2023 to the 31st of January. So let's copy that. And then first, let's just pop it into a browser, and you can see that this is CSV data, just like we were importing before. But now it's going to allow us to modify these parameters to change which data we're bringing back and for what dates. So let's take this URL and switch to Excel. And if we go to the same technique we did before, so we're going to say that we're going to import the data from the web. And we paste in our API query, and it goes ahead, retrieves the data, gives us a preview of the data. Again, we switch to UTF-8 and then say load. So now we have that same data, the January data for London. But we want to make it so that we can change the location and the dates directly in Excel. So let's click on another sheet within Excel, add 3 titles: location, start date, and end date. And then we're going to add in the start date and end date. I'm going to make sure that these are formatted of text, because this makes it simpler, particularly for date queries, date cells, so that we don't need to make modifications to that and add more date formatting code. So I can add, say, Washington, D.C. with a start date of 2022, 1st of January 2022 to the end of January 2022. And now I'm going to name these cells. So I'm going to name them location, start date, and end date. So if I check back, we've got a location cell, a start date cell, and an end date cell. So now let's go to our query and see what was actually created behind the scenes by Excel when we imported the first data set here. If we look here, we can actually look into the advanced editor and see that Excel created a Power Query script when we performed that initial get data from a URL. And so now we can modify this script and add the ability to read in data from those cells. So the first part is to create some variables that read data from the cells. And so here's the code to read the data from the location. So it creates a new location variable. This stores the information in the script from the name range location and in the first cell location. A name range can have multiple cells, could have multiple columns or rows, and so it does need to know that it needs to come from that top left cell of the area. Then we add two more, start date and end date. And then finally, we insert that into the query. So right now, here's the query that we pasted in before, and it's completely fixed with its London and January 2023 dates. So let's modify that by first just breaking it out into a separate line of code to keep things simple. And then here in the middle, you can see that I've inserted the location and start date and end date into that URL using these ampersand characters here. And that we've stored that in a new variable called API query. So let's put that into the command here. And we press done. And now one of the things that happens when you change queries within Power Query, it does validate that you do have the right permissions and you do trust where you're getting the data from. So it's asking you about data privacy for the Visual Crossing web server. And we're going to go ahead and say we understand this and we agree that the current workbook can access the Visual Crossing Weather API server. And now you can see in the preview, now we have Washington, D.C. starting in the 1st of January 2022, going to the end of January 2022. So let's close and load that. And now we can see that same data reflected here. And if we make a change to the location, so let's say now we want to go to Paris, and we want to go in, say, July, then we can change the dates, the locations. It doesn't change immediately. As soon as I either right mouse click and say refresh, or I can go up to the data tab and refresh all. Now it's going to load the data, and now you can see that we've got data for Paris for July 2022. So it is a more advanced technique using Power Query like this, but it does give you access to more features, in particularly parameterizing the requests, combining multiple requests if you want to bring in data from multiple locations, doing a lot more advanced tools. So it's a useful technique if you have slightly more sophisticated requirements. Thank you for watching. We will be adding links to the documentation that we have on these topics in the description below. If you have any questions, please put them in those comments below. Also, you can reach out to our support organization to help you as well.